The Bible is an amazing book. It speaks truth that carries to every generation. It's not just something that they wrote 2,000, 3,000 years ago, and we look at that and say, okay, well, that was nice for them to write that down for us. We're reading their literature. No, the Bible is something that carries through every generation, and it is applicable for every generation. I can read something that was written 2,000 years ago and like, oh my goodness, I see how that applies to me in 2024. Because it's the living Word of God. It is something that carries through every age. It also has stories of historic events that have important life application. I can look at the event. I can read. It's a history book too, where I can read what happened in history, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see how that story can apply to me. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is Joshua in the Battle of Jericho, and I will confess to you the reason why that was my favorite story when I was a kid is because that is my name. Joshua was the name I was given at birth, so of course that would be my favorite story. If I was given Judas, I'd be upset with my parents, and that might be my favorite story because it has my name in it. But now later on in life, I look at that story, and it's not because my name's in that story, but I love that story because of how much is packed in there and the miracle that happened and what God did in Jericho that day. If you're not familiar with the story, it's in Joshua chapter 6, and I do encourage you to go read that story because it's an incredible historic event. You look at it like that could never happen. Oh, with God all things are possible. With God all things are possible. And he did do those things. What's amazing to me is when people, archaeologists and stuff, they start digging and they, oh wow, look, we found this. Don't tell anybody. Why? Because it proves that Bible story true. We found it. They found chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea. Don't tell anybody. Why are there chariot wheels out in the bottom of an ocean? Well, the Bible does say as they crossed through the Red Sea, God popped those chariot wheels right off. And then they found chariot wheels down there. Like, oh no, don't tell anybody because it just confirms that the Bible's true again. I love it when they find things that confirm that the Bible is true. So we read this historic event of Jericho in Joshua chapter 6, and if you've never read it, please read it. It's not going to take too much of your time, but it is an enjoyable read. But let me give you just a few of the highlights of what's going on in this story. God tells Joshua and the people of Israel to march around Jericho one time for 6 days. So don't make a noise, don't speak a word, just march around the wall and then go back to your camp. And it's a city, so it's going to take a minute. They march around the city of Jericho, and then they go back to their camp. The next day, what do? They march around the city of Jericho, and then they go back to their camp. They do this for 6 days, not making a sound. Now, on the seventh day, they're told to march around it 7 times. Clear your calendar. It's going to be a long day. We're going to march around this thing 7 times. And then on the 7th time, we are going to blow our trumpets and we are going to shout. And at that time, the wall will fall down and we can go in and take the city. God said that's what was going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. The wall fell down. I mean, that's an intimidating scream. Or God's the one that fought for them. God went ahead and knocked that wall down. They were able to go into the city. But there's one more instruction that is often skimmed over because it's not a very exciting instruction in this story. We read the marching around, we read the blowing of the trumpet, we read the yelling at the wall. Yell at it. You'll scare it down. Just yell at it. Now they're going to yell, and at that time, the wall's going to come down. We see all of those things, and we're like, that's exciting. But there's one instruction that's in that story that people are like, yeah. They just keep going because it's not exciting at all. Let's look at this instruction. It's in Joshua chapter 6 and verse 18. But you keep yourself from the things devoted to destruction, lest when you have devoted them, you take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. But all silver and gold and every vessel of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. Don't keep anything for yourself, okay? That's the instruction. You're going to walk around this city. The wall is going to fall down. You are going to go in and you're going to take over the place. It's all exciting news, right? One more instruction. Don't take anything for yourself. The temptation would be to collect the spoils of war. That's what you do. When you conquer a city, if there's something valuable, it's yours now, so you take the spoils of war. God says don't do that. God doesn't want them to go in and take these things. This was the first victory that the children of Israel experience when they go over the River Jordan and into the Promised Land. This is the very first fight they have. And anything that was gained was supposed to be given to the Lord. Any spoils of war that you get, those are supposed to go to the Lord. This goes right along with giving God the first fruits. The Jews had a law. It's called the law of the first fruits, and they were to keep that law in front of their minds all the time. And whatever they did, keep that law in the front of your minds. It's the law of the first fruits. The people of Israel were commanded to give to the Lord before you soak up the blessings for yourself. That's what they were told to do. So when you get a blessing from God, you give a portion of that to the Lord before you enjoy the rest of it. And God wanted them to think of him, acknowledge me. Before the people just spent everything God blessed them with, they gave a portion of it to the Lord for his use. And by the way, that's a very healthy practice. God blessed me, and before I use it for my own desires, before I use it, I'm going to give a portion of it back to God. Why would you do that? God doesn't need your money. He doesn't need your things. He's God. If he needed it, he'd create it, right? He can create it. It's not about that. It's about acknowledging him first and acknowledging the fact that you've got a blessing. Where did the blessing come from? The blesser. So God gives them this law of the first fruits. It came off the top. It came first. They acknowledged God and gave out of their gratitude before they enjoyed the blessings themselves. And it reminded them to focus on the blesser before the blessing. Now, we could probably learn a lot about that from them today. You know, even my life, I could look at that and go, you know what, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Because, I mean, you've been blessed. I know you've been blessed. You got here somehow this morning. Not only that, but here is a blessing. The fact that God gave us a building and we're here in this city. God has blessed you many ways. None of us in here are starving. There's warmth right now. We're feeling it. We have so many blessings in our life. But what we fail to do sometimes is acknowledge where we got it. We enjoy the blessing and we don't think about the blesser. That is a good law. People get so wrapped up in the things of life that we rarely acknowledge the person that provided those blessings. And that's just natural. And hopefully it's not just me. I do it too. Hopefully it's not just me. Hopefully, well, it would be nice if it was just me. I'm just thinking maybe it's not. The spoils of Jericho belong to the Lord, and he wanted them to realize this. This is the first victory you are getting when you go into the Promised Land. Give it to me first. Let it be used for the things of the Lord. Don't take the spoils for yourself. If anyone took the spoils for themselves, they would bring destruction to themselves also. God says, don't do it, because if you take the things of destruction, you will bring destruction upon yourself. So please dedicate the first things to the Lord. This is the warning that they received before they went into Jericho. Then we turn the page to chapter 7, and we see that Israel loses a battle against a very small city called Ai. Even the name is short. It's 2 letters. If you can say both letters, then you have pronounced it right. There's an A and there's an I, and that's the whole name. It's the city of Ai. It's a very small city. Compared to Jericho, Ai is nothing. They even say, hey, let's go take it over. And the people say, you know what, we only need about 3,000 guys to take care of this. It's such a small city. So they agree, yeah, send a portion of us in. We don't all need to go. It's a blip on the radar. Let's go ahead and do this. But Israel lost 36 men in that battle, and they left defeated against Ai. Now Jericho was no problem. They walked around, yelled at it, came down, they went in, defeated, everything's good. Ai, these few little people over here, they lost that one. They lost that battle. 36 men died, and they ran away defeated. 36 dads, brothers, husbands, or sons did not come home that day. So you've just messed with family dynamics. There's a lot of grieving going on in the nation of Israel. They've lost 36 men. Life was instantly changed for so many people, and Joshua wants to know why. How did we defeat Jericho and turn around and get this little neighborhood over here, and we run away defeated from the little neighborhood, and we lose 36 of our own men? How did we do this? What happened here? So Joshua falls down on his face and he calls out to the Lord, and this is what God says to Joshua. Look at verse 11 of Joshua chapter 7. Israel has sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant which I commanded them, for they have even taken some of the accursed things, and have both stolen and deceived, and they have also put it among their own stuff. Therefore, the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies, but turned their backs before their enemies, because they have become doomed to destruction. Neither will I be with you anymore unless you destroy the accursed from among you. This is breaking news for Joshua. He's like, we did what? What do you mean? We did what? Somebody among Israel has taken the accursed things. I said to give it to the Lord, and this person has gone ahead and taken it from him. He went ahead and took the spoils of war. Someone in the camp has brought a problem to the nation of Israel. God was not fighting for them because of their disobedience. There was something that had taken their attention away from their relationship with God. That's what's going on here. Something's got your attention and you're not focused on me anymore. There's a sin in the camp. The victory of Jericho was exciting for them. I think we would be excited too. You walk around a city 7 times and then you yell at it and the wall falls down like God said it would. That's going to give you an adrenaline rush. Like, oh my goodness, it's going according to plan. And what a ridiculous plan it is, but it's working. Blow the trumpet, yell at the wall, it falls down. Who thought of this? That has to be God. But it's working. They're going to get pretty excited. And the treasures were going to be enough of a temptation that somebody might want to disobey and take them. And God knew that because it was a pretty wealthy city. I also want to mention there's another problem taking place in this story. Before Joshua took Israel around Jericho, before they defeated Jericho, he spoke with God about what they should do. And God told him the plan about walking around the wall. But he did not take the same action when it came to the battle against Ai. Joshua didn't talk to God before they went into this battle. If he would have spoken to God before, God might have said, now hold on, you don't want to do that yet. Because somebody has disobeyed. But God didn't, or Joshua doesn't go to God. He just assumes, hey, one victory, let's add another one to it. And this one's small, why can't we defeat them? Since we just defeated such a great city, why can't we just take down the small city? Makes sense logically, but what he does not do is consider God in this. Sometimes the victories and the blessings can consume us to the point where God is seldom considered from day to day. It happens in our lives too. We've got to train ourselves. We've got to train ourselves. We're easily distracted by the blessings, so be careful. In your life, in my life, we need to be careful because sometimes we just enjoy it so much that we forget who gave it to us. So be careful. This is exactly why God gave Israel the law of the first fruits. You need to train yourself to acknowledge God before you dive deep into the blessings. Before you enjoy them all, consider where you got those. Consider the blesser and be grateful and be thankful to God. I want to thank you for this. Before I enjoy it, I want to acknowledge where I got it from, and I want to share it with you somehow. I want to give you the first fruits. Off the top, I give it to you as an acknowledgement that this is where I got it from. Joshua is now on a search to find out who committed this sin against the Lord. Who did it? Who did it? So God gives him the instructions for how he's going to discover who took of the spoils. And Joshua delivers this message to the people. He's like, what do we do now, God? What do we do? Like, this is what you're going to do. Tell the people this is what's going to happen. Look at verse 14. In the morning, therefore, you shall be brought according to your tribes, and it shall be that the tribe which the Lord takes shall come according to families. And the family which the Lord takes shall come by households, and the household which the Lord takes shall come man by man. Then it shall be that he who is taken with the accursed thing shall be burned with fire, he and all that he has, because he has transgressed the covenant of the Lord, and because he has done a disgraceful thing in Israel. Now, every person in the nation of Israel is feeling the pressure about what's going to happen tomorrow morning. What's going down? God's going to narrow it all the way down to the specific person that did it. Like, how did he find out? Well, he's God. He's God. It's really hard to surprise him. It's really hard to hide something from him. I made up a joke one time, told him, he already heard it. I made it up. He already heard it. He's God. He's God. He's going to know. So now everybody's feeling that pressure. Everybody, oh my goodness, tomorrow morning's really going to happen. God's going to reveal the one who brought defeat to Israel. Someone defied God's commandments and brought them to a place where God could not bless the nation. You've got something wrong, and I can't bless that. 36 men have lost their lives, and God was going to expose the one who was to blame tomorrow morning. That's not a good night's sleep. Even if you know you didn't do it. You don't know if it was your son, your daughter. You don't know who did this. You don't know who it is, but God knows. So nobody's sleeping good in the nation of Israel. The next morning, everyone stands in suspense, waiting to see what's going to happen. Look at verse 16. So Joshua rose early in the morning and brought Israel by their tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. He brought the clan of Judah, and he took the family of the Zarhites. And he brought the family of the Zarhites man by man, and Zabdi was taken. Then he brought his household man by man, and Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was taken. God has just narrowed it down to one man. One man. Achan, you're busted. This one man named Achan. All eyes are on him. Like, what did you do? Okay, yeah, it was me. How did they find out? It's God. It's God. But there's still one thing that has to happen. Now, you would think catching the man responsible would be all that was necessary in this. You think, okay, we got our man. We found him. You would think that's all that would have to happen. But Joshua recognizes that there's still one more thing that needs to be done. As far as the investigation goes, everything's over. We've got our guy. We've got our guy. But Joshua challenges Achan to take things one step further. Like, okay, we've got him. We know who it was. You are the reason 36 families are without their relative. You're the reason those lives were lost. This crime is on your head, Achan. But Joshua says, I need you to do one more thing. I need you personally to do something. Look at verse 19. Now Joshua said to Achan, my son, I beg you, give glory to the Lord God of Israel and make confession to him and tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Believe it or not, Joshua is asking Achan for some help here. I need your help. Joshua's about to have a man executed for a crime that cost 36 men their lives. Yeah, Achan, this is your final day. It's coming to you. God has narrowed the search down to you specifically. Everyone just witnessed it. What more can Joshua really ask? He's done. Why would you ask anything of Achan? But Joshua thinks there's something that needs to happen. In these last few moments of Achan's life, Joshua is asking him to lead. I need you to lead the people. I need you to take leadership right now. The people desperately need to see Achan own what he did. They need to see you own it. Yeah, is it going to change the outcome from you? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And Joshua calls it giving glory to the Lord. That's an unusual way to describe it, isn't it? I want you to give glory to the Lord, Achan, but that's exactly what he wants Achan to do. That's exactly what it is giving glory to the Lord. Israel needs to see Achan show humility here. They needed to see him remove any blame that might have been directed towards God. Because Israel's going to be upset when you are executed. These people are going to have hypothetical situations going on here, and somebody's going to blame him. I need you to own it. I need you to take leadership, Achan. So in Achan's last recorded act, this is what he says. Look at verse 20. And Achan answered Joshua and said, Indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and this is what I have done. When I saw among the spoils a beautiful Babylonian garment, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. And there they are, hidden in the earth in the midst of my tent, with the silver under it. Achan set the example of what to do when your wrong behavior is brought to your attention. Even though Achan is typically portrayed as an evil man, I see him as a good leader, at least in how he finished his life. Good for you, sir. Good for you. He could have remained silent and the outcome would have been the same for him. You don't have to confess anything, but I need you to. I need you to do that. Why? Because these people need to see you own it. They need to see it. Because if they don't see it, somebody's going to point to God. I know somebody will point to God. You need to own it. And he says, it's what I have done. I saw it. I took it. I coveted it. It was all me. It was all something I did. He did the very thing Joshua asked him to do. And I want you to see the details of Joshua's request. Don't miss this. I want you to see the details of this. So let's look at that again. Verse 19. So Joshua said to Achan, My son, I beg you, give glory to the Lord God of Israel and make confession to him. And tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Two things are mentioned here. Glorify God and confess. That's all I need you to do, Achan. I want you to glorify God and I want you to confess. The word confess means to be in agreement with, not just to tell on yourself. That's what we see, confess. If I confess, that means I'm telling on myself. No, that's not the definition here. The definition means to be in agreement with, okay? To confess your sins means that you're agreeing with God that it is sin. It is wrong. I confess, I'm in agreement. We see it the same way. It was a sin. It was a sin. We do this, when we do this, what we're doing is we're glorifying God by acknowledging that our sin was against God. I agree with you that it was a sin, and it was a sin against you. We're the ones who did the injustice, not you. Our behavior was wrong, and we are now submitting to Him in agreement that our behavior was wrong. When we humble ourselves, God is glorified. So I need you to do two things, Achan. I want you to glorify God, and I want you to confess. I need you to be in agreement with Him. What you did was wrong, and I need you to do it in front of everybody, because they need to see you own it. They need to see this. In today's vernacular, that's all it means. Own it. You could have said that, 50 years ago, and like, own what? Like, own it. That means evaluate the situation, evaluate the whole thing, take responsibility for your behaviors and the outcome of it, That's what it means. Well, why didn't you just say that? Because today we say own it. It simplifies it. It makes it easier for us. We got it now. Own it. That's all he's asking Achan to do. And by the way, this can be a tough thing to do. It can be a very tough thing to do. Admitting that you've done something wrong is one thing. But to admit that your mindset is wrong feels a little bit more personal. It's easier to admit that you accidentally scratched somebody's car than to admit that you've been holding bitterness towards them. Like, I'm sorry I scratched your car. Hey, no big deal. It's all right. My insurance will take care of it. We're good. All right, thanks. No problem, right? Unless you don't have insurance, and then it becomes a little more of a problem. Then you've got guilt and shame and all that comes with you. You should have had insurance. But it's easier to say, yeah, I accidentally scratched your car. Or, hey, I'm sorry, I just broke this. It's easier to do that than to say, I have been bitter with you for such a long time. It's easier to admit the physical thing than it is the mentality. It's easier to apologize for saying the wrong words than it is for having an unforgiving heart. Man, I shouldn't have said that. That's one thing. Like, I'm having a hard time forgiving you, and I know I'm wrong for doing it. That's harder to do. Much harder to do. Holding a grudge can feel like something that you're entitled to, but it is a sin against God just like any other sin. And we do it as Christians. You may have a little grudge that you're feeding right now. I don't know that. Don't even smile. Now you all smiled. I know you're all holding grudges. You might have something right now. You're like, man, that individual, they hurt me so bad. I'm having a hard time letting that go. And I am holding a grudge. I know I'm holding a grudge. That is just as much of a sin as any other sin. Look at what Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 12. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. This verse is often used to speak about addictions. Eating food is lawful, but you don't want it to control you. That makes sense. Watching TV is permitted, but you don't want it to own you. Like, yeah, but it's such a good series. You don't want to be owned by that. Shopping can be fun. Yeah, there's the deep conviction right there. Like, oh, shopping can be fun, but if it's irresistible, it can destroy you. You don't want to be owned by that, but it feels so good. I understand. You got a lot of nice stuff that you're going to have to sell because you don't have any money. It can destroy you. We can easily see these applications in the verse. We can see how it applies there. But what about the lack of forgiveness or bitterness or anger? Is it okay to be angry or hurt? Yes, absolutely. It happens to all of us. The problem occurs when we choose to live there. When we choose to let it own us. That's when the problem happens. That's when we're brought under the power of those things. And before long, our character begins to change. And we treat people bad and we become negatively wired. I've been there, you've been there. We know what can happen to our lives when we hold on to these things. Remember the warning that God gave the people of Israel before they conquered Jericho. Let's look at that again. Joshua 6 and verse 18. But you, keep yourself from the things devoted to destruction, lest you make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. Sin is always destructive, whether you are saved or not. Sin is always destructive. It always brings disorder in your life. It is devoted to destruction. It's always going to destroy. A Christian can be completely redeemed and completely forgiven and completely miserable all at the same time. Like, I can't stand that person. You mean that person that God gave his life for and loves unconditionally? The person that God said, I will forgive their sins and throw them as far as the east is from west? That God who has the right to hold us to any sin that we've ever committed, the one that says, I will free them from all their sins, that's the person you can't forgive? That's the one. That's the one. and you become miserable. Yeah, you might be completely forgiven and redeemed, but you can be completely miserable all at the same time. And every single one of us have a choice whether or not to be controlled by the negative emotions and mindsets. It's still your choice. But it's so hard to forgive. I get that. I understand that. But it is a choice. It is just a decision. The problem is that we overlook the fact that sometimes we're being controlled by them. I'm being controlled by unforgiveness or bitterness or anger. I am being controlled by it. If there is someone in your life who you just can't seem to forgive, you're the one that's in captivity, not them. Because there's a good possibility they're not even thinking about it. And that just makes you mad, doesn't it? like they should be suffering. No, you're the only one doing that. You're the only one in captivity there. Are you holding a grudge or harboring bitterness towards someone? If you are, you're the one who will end up changing through it all, not them. You're the one that's going to end up changing. When we hold on to these negative emotions, we eventually become depressed or develop a low self-esteem, and we're angry with everybody, even the innocent people. We're angry with them too, and we treat them bad because we're hurting on the inside. Not because that person continues to do it to us, but we're not letting that event go, so it continues to affect us. And then we start affecting everybody else. It's like that event just hurts us one time after another. It just keeps occurring in our own life because we will not forgive them. We will not let go of the bitterness. We won't let the anger go. So we start changing, and we start treating other people who have done nothing wrong poorly. It's natural. Sin is destructive. It will destroy. If this is something you're struggling with, I have one piece of advice that I really sincerely hope you will consider. And yes, it's humbling, and nobody likes to be humbled. Okay? So I'm going to tell you in advance, you're not going to like what I have to say. If you're going through this, you're not going to want to hear this, but it's good to hear. It's good to hear. Glorify God and confess it. Go ahead and glorify God and confess it. Acknowledge Him and agree that it is a sin. In other words, own it. Own it. But what they did was wrong. But holding bitterness in your heart or holding a grudge against them or just not forgiving them is a sin that you're doing. It's so wrong also. It's just as wrong. Yeah, but I'm the victim. Yeah, of their sin and yours. You're the one that's being affected by unforgiveness, not them. Now you've just added double victim. Now you're the victim twice. One was what they did, and the other one's what you're doing. Humility feels unpleasant before we experience it, and very liberating after we do. Humility, I do not want to humble myself. But once you do it, you're like, I'm free. That's very nice. I wish I would have done that earlier. Look at Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 2. When pride comes, then comes shame, but with the humble is wisdom. Humility is one characteristic that nobody can deny that Jesus possessed. He was so humble. He was despised and he was rejected. He was falsely accused. He was ridiculed. He was called names. He was even betrayed by his own friends. They turned their back on him. Yet he chose not to be brought under the power of any of it. I will not be brought under the power of any of it. When someone does you wrong, it can be difficult to just drop the charges and let them walk free, right? Yeah, I cannot drop the charges. I cannot let them go. I'm not saying that it's easy to avoid negative responses. I'm just saying that those are just as wrong as the initial injustice was. It's just as wrong. Does letting it go mean that you're you're going to live like nothing ever happened? No, it does not. It just means that you cancel the debt that you feel the other person owes you. That's all it means. I am freeing you from the debt. That doesn't mean the event didn't occur. That doesn't mean that I'm not hurt deeply. It doesn't mean that what you did was right. I can't say it's right. I can't say, oh, don't worry about it. No, don't worry about it. I can't say it's right if it wasn't right. Like, hey, I'm sorry I did that to you. It's all right. That's a lie. It's not all right. It was all wrong. It doesn't mean that you live like nothing ever happened. It just means that you cancel the debt that you feel they owe you. You treat them with love even if things have to change. Because sometimes what people do changes the scenario totally. And we can't go back to the way things were before. And even though things change, that's fine. But I'm going to show you love in spite of it. And I'm going to cancel the debt I feel you owe me. That is forgiveness. That's what forgiveness is. Don't take something that doesn't belong with the person God created you to be. The spoils of war, leave them alone. Leave them alone. If you take on the sins of bitterness and unforgiveness or decide to cling on to that grudge, you're going to hang on to that grudge, it will eventually ruin you instead of the person you're doing it to. Like, how much are you suffering? Oh, I forgot all about that. Now I will be mad at you for that. You should have been suffering and remembered it as long as I have. You're the one suffering, not them. Not them. So how do you protect yourself from becoming party to these sins? It's called self-control. It's called, I'm not out of control, they are. Hold on, you might be out of control. Just give me a second here. Look at Proverbs chapter 25 and verse 28. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Go to God and tell him that you need help. God, I need you right now. I really need you. Tell him that the hurt that you are experiencing, tell him all about that hurt. Tell him about it. Pour it out to him. I am really hurting because of what they did. Sometimes we have to go to God and say, I'm hurting because of what you did. Even though he didn't sin, sometimes we say, you had the power to stop it and you didn't, and you're the one I'm mad at right now. Even though he didn't do anything wrong. But sometimes we need to go to God and just tell him about the hurt that we're experiencing and ask him to give us the strength that we need to get through it humbly. Humbly. And then act on it. Don't just assume that God's going to do it all for you. Like, okay, I asked you to do it, now you do it. No. God doesn't bring you to the fire, he brings you through the fire. But you got to go through the fire too. So you need to act on it. Go to the person and let them know it's forgiven, it's over. Or maybe that's not something you can do. Sometimes, it's sad but true, but sometimes we're mad at somebody that passed away. You can't tell that person that I'm sorry, would you forgive me? They're not here anymore. Sometimes you just have to release them from that debt that you feel like they owe you. It's okay, it's over. I'm not going to live under the power of that anymore. Respond to the situation in a way that glorifies God. Glorify God and confess. That means agree with him that this is a sin also. We all know when we're doing something or harboring something that's wrong. Every one of us know that. It's not a surprise to us. We all know when we're doing that. And if you are in the wrong, own it. Just own it. Go to God and agree with him that it's a sin and humble yourself. If we choose not to, we're like a city broken into and left without walls. The enemy finds opportunities to get in and get us more focused on things that will bring us farther down. There's no walls protecting you because there's no self-control in your life. You're not giving this over to God. You're not taking control of this situation. You're letting it eat at you. Then you are like a city that's been broken into and left without walls. And the enemy is going to come in over and over and over again to get you to focus on things that's going to keep you down. You've got to let it go. You've got to forgive. The victim of unforgiveness and bitterness is always the person holding on to it. That's who's affected. And these things are sin. Own it. Just own it. Agree with God about them and choose to glorify Him through it all. 2 things we need you to do: glorify God and confess, which means own it. Go ahead and own it. You're made for this. Yeah, but it's so hard. I know. I've been here too. I've had long talks with God about the way I felt towards somebody. And I told him, I know I'm wrong. I just don't want to do what I know I'm supposed to do. I want to despise this person, and I know it's wrong. That's the first step. Confess it. I know it's wrong. You don't even have to talk to me about that. We both know I'm wrong. But what I need strength to do is humble myself and do what's right, and that's where I'm struggling right now, God. And I need your help here. I need your help because the only one I'm destroying is me, and I know that too. And I'm okay with that right now, and I shouldn't be okay with that. And confess it and glorify God. Have that conversation with Him. It's a hard one, but have that conversation with Him. Don't take on things of destruction. They will destroy you. Don't take the accursed thing. And if you already have, own it. And let's get back to shining God's love again. Because that right there is like putting a bushel over a light. It's not shining out there anymore because you've got it covered. A grudge, unforgiveness, bitterness, whatever it is, I'm hiding that light. I'm not shining that anymore because I'm letting this thing own me. And I've been brought under the power of that. Go ahead and go to God and tell Him your struggle. Go for it. Is it hard? Absolutely. Be real with Him. I'm wrong. You know I'm wrong. We both know I'm wrong. But I'm okay with that right now, and I'm going to need your help not being okay with that. Be real with Him. He's a good God. We've got to own it. Otherwise, we're being held captive by our own decisions. Get out there and own it, and let's start shining that light again.